Thanks for stopping by Big Top Gaming. My name's Brian,
No, I'm Ethan.
and this is our first ever podcast. Well, not our first ever one. I mean, it's the first one. No, it's not even the first one me and Ethan have done together. It's the first one we've done under the Big Top Gaming brand or whatever you want to call it, I guess. Because we were on Crippled System together at least twice, right?
Yeah, I was only on there twice. You were on there way more than me.
Yeah, it was like I think the introduction to Mark III.
Yeah,
Because
and then one way back in Mark II.
I distinctly remember you complaining about the way that Empower worked.
No, I didn't complain about it. I just said, oh yeah, I complained about it.
You complained.
Yeah, I did.
So we're gonna try and run these maybe twice a month, maybe once a month. I think it's gonna be nice to supplement the videos for Warmachine stuff since we are cutting the frequency of those back a little bit. So and this podcast is gonna be more Warmachine focused. I think Ethan and I are both like multi-system players, maybe me more so than he is, but I think we're going to try and really point this one towards Warmachine only, just to like help fill the gaps when we might be playing another game on the channel, or we will have that empty space for some Warmachine games where we're used to seeing like 2 or 3 videos a week. So I think that about covers the early stuff. So Ethan, I think for the most part, I think people know quite a bit about us in terms of our like current Warmachine existence. But how did you get started in wargaming in general?
Wargaming in general, I started playing 40K like way back in, God, I want to say end of middle school. One of my buddies like had the models for me. He tried teaching me the game, and I just like sat there as we moved around like orc models on our kitchen floor, and I was just like, what the fuck is this? And then like he just kept bringing it every time he came over, and eventually like I caved in, and like we started buying models with our like measly income from landscaping and stuff that we used to do on the weekends. So then like I started playing that in high school in our gaming club, and like I just absolutely fell in love with miniatures. And then eventually, after playing that, like you drugged me into Warmachine several years later.
Yep. So you can, when you have kids someday, you can get them hooked on miniature wargaming and say, back in my day, I used to have to mow a whole lawn to get a box of Orc Boys.
Ugh, it was awful. More like
Yep.
installing the lawns and landscaping. Just ugh.
So we ended up kind of crossing paths first in 40K. What kind of, other than me kind of pushing you a little bit, what was the thing that like attracted you to Warmachine coming from that 40K world?
I think the way like the individual activations, I really thought that was cool. And then like the war beasts and stuff, you eventually like you found out my weakness of like the circle faction and like the druids and all that stuff. Like I thought that was really cool. And you just kind of kept pushing it and playing demo games. And like I just fell in love with like the feat system and thought like everything was just kind of so cool how it interacted. And it was such more like playing the with your opponent than just like sitting across the table and shooting for 5 turns.
Yeah, I think the comparison that most people use when they like kind of make the transition from 40K to a game like Warmachine, or probably just Warmachine in general, is that it feels like you're going from checkers to chess, and I think a lot of people appreciate that the level of complexity and control you have over the game. So it was nice to be able to get you into the game for sure, because I think for me it was mostly just bashing my head into Krios 1 over and over and over again with Sorsha 1 was not a fun time.
Yeah, how those two casters were battle box casters, and then I got stuck with Kaya 1.
Yep.
Like, I hated all of you. I hated you so badly once I realized what your guys' casters did, and I was like, I can teleport a heavy back to me. Yay.
Yep. And I think you got the jump on me in terms of starting wargaming. I think based on our conversations, I think you started playing in 3rd edition 40K.
I started playing at the end of third, like 3.5. I think is when I got deep into it back when like chaos was all cool, and that I'm one of those guys who always plays like the goody two shoes, like I'm the good guy, And then like for some reason Chaos really just like I thought they were cool, so I got to be the edgy boy. It's my normal good boy routine. So like yeah, back in the 3.5 heydays where like Terminators could breathe fire and you could give them demonic upgrades, like I love that shit.
It's kind of funny then that you didn't just. I think that that third edition Chaos stint might have touched you and shaped your life because, based on that, I would have thought you would have gone like a Signar route or something when you started in Warmachine.
No, I'm all about druids.
Circle's far from being good.
They're eco-terrorists. They're good people.
So for me, my wargaming, like, not, I won't say career, but my wargaming started with I think it's kind of fake start. The fake start was back when, I can't remember when this was, but it was the invasion block. I think Apocalypse had just come out for Magic because I was a huge Magic player. I've been playing Magic since I was uh, in grade school. I think the first set I ended up getting started in was like the tail end of Arabian Nights. So I'd been playing for a super long time, and I was at an old card store called CNC Games in Madison, but they had a store here in the Dells that I have tons of fun stories from. But uh, they had this game called Mage Knight kicking around, and I ended up getting into that a little bit because it seemed to be really hot really quick. And I started messing around with some of the models in there, and I tried to convert one of the, like, I think they were called Night Archers, into like a spawn figure. And then after that, it was kind of a bubblegum game, so I ended up leaving it, and I didn't look at war gaming again until it had to have been close to the end. No, it wasn't close to the end. I think it was smack dab in the middle of 5th edition 40K. And Ethan and I, we've, that's pretty much, I think, when we started uh, knowing each other or messing around with each other. I know that we kind of crossed paths in college a little bit. And it was funny because Ethan is a very broy looking person. He's very cut and long hair, always wearing Under Armour all the time. And I think my first experience with Ethan was he fell asleep in my math class. And from there, it kind of colored my opinion on him. I was like, that guy's such a slacker. So then when I walked into the store one day, I was just bringing my Space Wolves along. It was maybe, my fourth or fifth game into 40K. And then there was my slacky math mate, and he was rocking some chaos. So after that, we became pretty good friends, and we were kicking around in the 40K world for quite a while. It was kind of funny because the one of the people who kind of started the 40K movement in the Baraboo area, which is where Ethan and I both kind of got our start playing, at least together, right? The person who was kind of spearheading that tried to get some of us into Warmachine, and it was Mark II, early Mark II, I think even. And in my time of playing cards, playing Magic, so many of my core friend group, they would kind of like flirt with other games a little bit. So they were trying to play Pokemon and a Star Wars TCG, and Legend of the Five Rings was a big one for a hot minute too. And like I would get into them pretty hard, and then they would just leave the game and go back to Magic. So like I kind of developed this taste in my mouth of, if anyone tries to introduce a game that is outside of the main game that I play, they are the devil. So I cursed Warmachine so hard. I was like, this looks stupid. The warjacks are dumb, and why do I have to like magnetize all these pieces? Because that's how he was kind of I didn't know much about the game. I was just trying to not get people into Warmachine because I knew that they would just play it for a hot minute and leave it.
Yeah,
So
that's fair.
yeah, it's just a pain in the butt. I think the funny thing about our card purchasing was that the Dells area, the place I grew up in, didn't have like a committed card store for a while. We had like a sports card store that would sometimes get Magic stuff, but the way we got our cards was when our parents would take us grocery shopping in Baraboo to Darrow's, because it was the only grocery store around that wasn't like a local one, a small local grocery store. They had a vending machine there, and that vending machine was stocked with card games. It was the weirdest thing. So I would remember putting it, like begging my mom for like $8 so I could get a starter deck of Ice Age, and that was what she would shop, and I would hang out just opening cards and having a fun time. But so to get back on track, it was maybe while we were still kind of in the 40K mode, I think it might have been closer to the end of 5th edition. I had picked up some stuff because I was huge into trading, and I would sometimes I would get some Warmachine stuff just so I could flip it later and maybe look at it because it might look cool to paint or something. And I think I ended up with like a Crix battle box and never touched it, and then got rid of it. And then I ended up with a bunch of Trollblood stuff and tried to play that while I was in college in lacrosse. And the game just didn't stick to my ribs, although the models looked really cool, so I hung on to them. And then when I came back, I think it was on a summer break or something. That's when I ended up getting back in with playing Kador right away. And Tyler is a person who's been on the channel through Ice and Fire stuff, but nothing for Warmachine just yet. And we would often play the Krios 1 Mark II game into Sorsha 1, and Krios 1 just kind of always like beat her out, at least in my early days. I mean, I think Tyler had a little bit more experience in the game than I did. So that was kind of the start. Ever since I got in, I've always had an on again, off again relationship with 40K, which I think I'm getting into an on mode right now. But
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. It's
yeah,
happening.
it's just one of those things. Whenever a new edition comes out for 40K, it's like 40K is the siren that's on the edge of the shore, trying to lure you in with her song of Necrons look cool.
Look at all these cool, expensive models.
Yeah,
They're
they're so
so
sweet.
pretty.
Here's your
They are sweet.
$150 model.
Ugh.
Yeah, I know the monolith has got me right, but we'll stick to the Warmachine business. So during this on again, off again relationship with 40K, I got super hard into um, Warmachine. So I ended up getting mixed up with some of the Crippled System folks in Madison, and they kind of like helped guide me and Tyler in the early days through the Warmachine universe. And then Ethan came in shortly thereafter, and we just started hitting tournaments together all the time. And like back then, the Warmachine meta in Madison was a massive Shark Tank. We had the WTC. I don't think was a thing. Well, maybe it was probably still a thing, but we had the Warmachine weekend was the real big one, right? So we had plenty of people who'd won Warmachine weekend LCQs and topped the invitational in general back then. So it was always difficult. I mean, Keith Christensen was one of them. God, why can't I remember his name?
Names are hard.
He's that circle player that has the really like northern voice. He's got the Uber voice to him a little bit.
Now I'm drawing a blank. It's been so long.
I can't remember either. It's going to be funny if anyone from the Madison area listens to this because they're going to be like, "Oh yeah, that guy." I'll be like, as soon as they say it, I'll recognize it. But plenty of really like competitive players, high skill level players. So Ethan and I kind of got that classic Warmachine experience where you lose like your first 30 or 40 games before you really understand what's going on. And I think we both appreciated the challenge and just kind of leaned into it. So here we are. I think the only time I've ever really taken a break from Warmachine was maybe when Oblivion hit. I kind of like stepped away for a little bit, not because I thought the Oblivion changes were bad or anything, but more so A Song of Ice and Fire had come out, so that really like captured my interest, and it just took over a little bit of my main gaming for a little while. And Ethan, I
Yeah.
don't think you've ever really left the game except for maybe for a little while when you were in school.
Yeah, I think when I was in school for a little bit, like when 8th edition came out, and like Death Guard became its own faction, like I bought kind of heavily into Death Guard, but I didn't get to play that many games.
Yeah,
But
things in your area were a little bit different than they are around here. Living in the Madison area, it's so easy to get a game of just about anything. Like if there's a war game out there, there's someone in this area who plays it. I mean, for me and you both living in rural areas, that's not so immediate for us. But I mean, like within the 1 hour distance, you could probably find someone to play Battle Mech with. I think I've seen people flirting with like those old GW specialist games and all the historical garbage that's out there. So we're kind of spoiled for choice in terms of games, but when you get the further you get from Madison, the more difficult it is.
yeah, and I went to school up by the Twin Cities, so I wasn't familiar with there. Like I knew there was a 40K meta. When I was up there, I didn't know about the Warmachine meta until like halfway through my second year up there. So like I went a year without playing games up there. That was kind of rough. But then once I found the Minnesota meta, I started going out to their weekly game nights pretty much like almost every week, just because I
Yeah.
enjoyed playing with them.
That's a similar story kinda happened with me while I was in school in lacrosse. I there was a gaming club, and when I started at lacrosse, that was when 40K was kind of blossoming for me. I had owned multiple armies by then and had brought them to school with me and tried to find a way to stash them in my little dorm room, which was like the size of a closet. Um, but the school had a group that was like it was a club. It was a gaming club, right? So I go there and it's a lot of people playing Magic and they're really enjoying EDH. So I was still pretty deep into Magic at this time. So like they all seemed very like casual, and not like casual in a bad sense, but they just, play to have their fun. And here I come in with like my Angus Mackenzie, like super hug. I'm gonna let you guys play this 3 hour long game that's miserable deck. And it was funny. I think I even played with like I use custom playmats, like I do my own and everything, and it's super fun. But they were in the casual mode of like the person who has the playmat as the tryhard. So like that's kind of how I got labeled right away. And my one of my friends or one of the people that I had befriended through this was a fella named Jason, and he had stopped by my room one night, I think, to just grab some cards or something, and had seen all the 40K stuff hanging around, and he had ended up chatting to me about how he loved the 40K universe and he played all of the Dawn of War games, but just never really got into the war game itself. So the first taste is free. So I got him into a demo game of 40K, and from there, I think that's basically where the next generation of lacrosse 40K players started. Was all from playing 40K on a ping pong table in the commons area.
So it's all your fault.
Partially, the rest of the 40K players that existed back then in lacrosse were kind of like douchey. So it wasn't completely my fault. I just kind of introduced it to a new generation.
Well, that's something to be proud of at least.
Yeah, it's a good time. I think lacrosse still has a really strong 40K meta up there, and they're all pretty decent folks. And Jason's still playing and having a good time. So um, it's I couldn't quite get them into Warmachine while I was up there, but I'm still holding out hope. 10 years later or something.
It will happen.
So that's kind of like the background of Ethan and myself in wargaming. For Warmachine specifically, I've played every faction that is under the sun, and I think I'm pretty much at the point where I own just about every faction now, except for Protectorate. I've got pieces and bits here, but it's the army is so ugly. That's the thing. Their play style is so cool, and I love the idea behind a lot of their casters and the way they function. But God, is that a nasty looking faction? So every time I buy the models, I look at something like Exemplar Errants, and I'm like, I'm not painting these things.
But they're so churchy.
Exactly. So, Ethan, what's your kind of we've already touched on your circle history, but what kind of I know you've branched out a little bit. What's the rest of your Warmachine roster look like these days or in the past?
So I guess in the past, like for most of Mark II, I was a faction purist. Like I was all about that circle of Brokeros every week, and I didn't like start to branch out till the end of Mark II. Like I had played a few games into Ron, and I was like, man, Ron is really cool. So like I didn't like the Ret aesthetic. I wanted to play Ron, so I bought like a single Ron theme list, and then like I made a Thyron list to pair with it, and then like that was all I played of Ret. So like when people ask like, "Oh, you play Ret now?" I'm like, "No, I play Ron." There's a big difference.
Yeah, Ron was his own faction back then.
Yeah, he was. And like his theme list was so fun. Like it had it had to take a Hyperion, Stormfall Archers, Mages, Iris one. Like it was just super fun. And then I didn't really like start to branch out until Mark III, and then like I started dipping my toes in things like Mercs and just playing around with like Laylee's Resistance. And then like at the beginning of Mark III, I went heavy into Ret because like I wasn't bored with Circle. I just wasn't happy with how things shaped up in the edition change. And on the flip side, like Ret was just so good back then. Like
Yeah, they came
you,
out
rem-
hard and strong.
yeah, you remember our games of like Ossian versus Karchev. Like that was super fun
I think
for me.
for the longest time, I kept bashing my head into it. Felt like Krios won all over again. But I think most of the time you and I spent playing together in early Mark III was I was just like, bring out Ossian. Like it was just like you would select the club, or I would pick the club for you to beat me with, because I was going to find a way to beat Ossian in Khador. And I think we ended up stumbling on Sorsha 1 being a decent answer to him.
Yeah,
But
because it was literally a game of who kills the other caster first.
exactly. And then I think after a while it turned into Ossian magically lost Deadeye, and then I didn't have to worry about the matchup anymore.
Yeah, because he couldn't reliably hit shit.
Yep. So I know you've dabbled in convergence at least a little bit here and there. So is that kind of the run of what you've done for yourself? I know you've played Legion on the channel too, and all that stuff.
Yeah, the Legion was more of like a in the spur of the moment. I did buy like the entire Convergence army secondhand, and when it got there, like I opened the box, I was all excited, and half the shit was busted, and I was just like, I'm not dealing with this, and I put the box like in my closet for a year, and then didn't touch it. The only time I busted it out was to practice, like, get some cheeky Aurora 1 pre-Strange Bedfellow games in, because that was back when we were going to do the ATC together, and our captain, I was just messing with him, like, you know what? Maybe I'll play Aurora 1 Clockwork Legions. This will be fun. Just
Yep.
because, like, I was fucking with them so hard, and I actually got a few practice games in, and I was like, it didn't feel good. This was, like, way before all their updates, so it was just not a good time.
Yeah.
So
Hard.
back in the box they went.
So I
But I
guess
had a
that
bunch of fun with Lucant and what's her name, the partisan chick,
Iron. Locke. Yeah.
Locke. Yeah, my
Locke.
girl Locke.
Locke is probably a better, and I think it's still true today. She's probably a better convergence caster than she is a Crucible Guard caster. I don't think that's super controversial by any means.
I think that's true, but I think she has better tools in Crucible Guard, if that makes sense. Like she's a better cock caster, but they lack the tools that.
I could see it. I mean, like I think some people sometime overestimate the amount of tools that Crucible Guard has, but I could it's I'm still gonna hang my hat on she's better in Convergence than Crucible Guard, but or she
Oh, I
has
agree.
a better list in Crucible Guard or Convergence.
I mean, Matt, 9 vectors are just a hell of a drug.
Yep, they sure are. So I think the last thing we'll touch on in our history before getting into our big topic for this one is just our overall mindset with gaming. You had mentioned that we've played in the ATC. Now we haven't currently. I have not missed a single ATC. I was going to miss the one this year, but then the world fell apart, and I got to be able. I'm now able to say that I've been to every ATC. So I know for me, I would consider myself more on the competitive side, and it's kind of like I think the term casually competitive probably like pops around every now and again. I wouldn't say that I'm the bad competitive that most people talk about when they say you're a competitive war gamer. I don't like do everything I can to win the game. Like I don't pull cheeky weird moves or act skeezy or something or try to metagame against the person. I more so am competitive in every game I come to. My intention is to try and win, and I want my opponent to do everything in their power to win as well. We just want to have a good competitive game where we both bring our best, and whoever comes out on top at the end, we can at least say that we both gave it our all, and that in of itself is fun to me. It's not to say that I can't play like a casual funsies game, but you know, when I'm playing something where there's an understanding that we're being a little bit more casual, I still try to build my casual lists with the intention of trying to execute a good game. What would you say your kind of overall mentality is when you approach wargaming?
I think I'm in the same boat now. Like a couple years ago, I tried to jump more into like the competitive scene. Like I went to a couple qualifiers, like 2018 I think was my big year of like trying to be more competitive, because that was when like I had a summer job out at Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming, and I saw there was a qualifier for Warmachine weekend down in Colorado, which was just an 8-hour drive away. So I was like, fuck it. I ordered models like the week before, because that was when I found out about it. Hope they came in on time. They came in on Friday. I drove down about 5.5 hours, slept in my car, then like continued on in the morning because I didn't. I was I'm a really cheap guy, and I was like, I've slept in my car countless times. Like this doesn't bother me. pull into a truck stop, take a nap, take a shower there, good to go. And then like I ended up doing pretty okay there. Like I got third. I only lost to Sung Soo, who got first at that event. That was like he beat the shit out of me, so that was like kind of eye opening. And then when I got back to Wisconsin, I ended up going to Riverfront Rumble that year, and I actually won it. But that one, some of those wins were kind of skeezy. Like I pulled a couple gotchas. Some of them, most of them were like accidental gotchas. Like my opponents just didn't understand how the rule interactions worked. So like it felt kind of skeezy, and I don't want to be that guy who wins through that. But that's just kind of how some of those games shook up.
Well, and I think if I'm not mistaken, that was one of the first Riverfront Rumbles, so there was still quite a few casual people showing up out there, some new players too. But the event almost immediately got registered as a Warmachine Weekend qualifier, so it kind of changed the landscape a little bit for the event.
Yeah, and like it was a couple things like I played into a Kalissa round two, and he feeded bottom of one, and I was able to top it to him with Arcadius by charging my own models
Yep.
because Kalissa feat says friendly faction models can't be charged, and when I frenzy with Arcadius, I can pick my own model, so I was able to like to charge into spray range on her, and like some weird tricks like that. And then like there was one game where I left one of those undead gator people. It's been a husk. Minions. That was my big faction of 2018 when I was being semi-competitive, and like Xerxes charged the husk, and the husk RFP'd itself, so Xerxes didn't get to sprint off of it.
Yep.
And my opponent didn't realize that interaction, so that was another gotcha because he was in charge range of a wrestler.
Well, nothing like getting to Warmachine Weekend on a bunch of gotchas, and I think that was you played in, was that 2018?
Yeah, that was 2018.
So I think that was when you brought Rask and Arcadius, right?
Yep, because that was the weekend where Tharn released.
Yep, yeah, Iona was everywhere.
Yep.
So I think it's overall. I think when you think about if you're wondering about our efficacy in the game, although you just watch me and Ethan kind of play against each other, I think it's safe to say that we win more than we lose, but we're not like no one's burning a hole in their Rolodex to get a hold of us for the next WTC or anything like that.
Oh god, no. Like I'm the last person. I went through that phase there back when we ETC 2019.
Yep.
No, yeah, 2019, where I was like, all I played was Kruger 1 double Storm Raptors on Una, because my philosophy back then was to play the least amount of game I could with my opponent.
Yeah, you
As
kind
a,
of adopted that Morehouse thought pattern, or at least what he used to be. Is like, if I can play it was almost like the Australian mentality in general. Like if I can play the least amount of Warmachine, it's a good game.
yeah, just reliably top of 2 or top of 3 caster.
Yep. And then I was a live for the grind person. But I think if the WTC wants someone like Chris Green on their team, they're probably desperate enough to dial us one of these days.
No, they'd have to be pretty desperate to come to us for help.
So one of the things we wanted to talk about in this one, just to give you some Warmachine content other than just us waxing philosophical about our Warmachine careers, is the CID has kind of started up again, and we've gone through a Legion CID, which turned out really well. I think there were a few things that could have gone better, but in general, I think Legion players are quite happy, outside of the fact that it didn't really take Primal Terrors as being one of like the go-to themes for them. And then Trolls are just rounding the edge of coming out of CID. And I think some people, no matter what, I think some people are going to be upset about the way that pans out, because there's just some things that aren't going to work the way that people want them to. But there are some things that'll come out really well out of that CID. So I'm optimistic, being like Trolls being one of my top 3 factions I think that I play. So what we wanted to go through was just some CID wish listing. We're going to go through faction by faction, and I think we're going to try and keep it a little bit on the short and sweet side, and just kind of give like one example of something we'd really like to see touched on in CID for that specific faction. And I think there might be some where we can't quite give something on because we don't play it that often, but I think for the most part we should be able to come up with something for each of them. So
Yeah.
to start off, we'll just go in the good old war room order. Uh, if Signar were to hit CID tomorrow, Ethan, what do you think is one of the things they would like to see the most come out of that?
I think, and this might be like low hanging fruit because Storm Division is already on the roster, but I really hope they do something with Storm Division for the small base infantry. Because even when Storm Division was like the go-to list for Signar, like it was just like more Storm Lances on more Storm Lances, and now that like they get unyielding too, it's just like why do I reach for any of the small base units in this theme when half of them are kind of mopey, and then and they cap out at okay. Whereas like you can just take Storm Lances, which, funnily enough to everybody, don't have lances. They're just like the infinitely better option. I'd like to see that other stuff brought up. Maybe not Storm Lances nerfed so much, but yeah, that's just like my one thing for Signar.
I think for me and Signar, I have a lot of the same thoughts you do, but to hit on something a little different, I would like to see maybe diversification of the themes a little bit more. Like heavy metal, it just doesn't seem, it's supposed to be like the Jack theme for them, but it just doesn't feel like a Jack theme for them. I know that in the times that I've played heavy metal, it's often been more, more centered around like precursors. It's like a poor man's flames.
Yeah,
And
that's weird. It's like a poor man's Flames with battle engines.
yeah, and that's the thing is I feel like it's more of a battle engine theme than it is a warjack theme. Like I think Signar just has like, and maybe that's something that is more on the side of what I'd lean into for a CID for them is that their warjacks just don't seem like they really have a good performance value to them, like when you get into the heavies and stuff. So I think that's something that Signar would probably like to see is just being able to play those big jack bricks like Kador can or something like that or Menoth.
Yeah, somebody like
Like
Bubble
Cray or
Butt.
Darius.
Yeah, Bubble Butt Darius. Because like I feel like that's not the Crick's problem. Like they get punished for having too good of lights, so their
Yeah.
heavies are just kind of mopey because like the lights just are so good.
Yeah, the heavies just I mean, the Ironclad's better than what I think people give it credit for, but when you get into the other ones, like the Reliant is one that I'd really love to see. Like I magnetize every Stormclad that I build in hopes that someday it gets good, but then like it just isn't.
And then you got things like the Avenger. Like
Yeah.
some of their jacks are just kind of really expensive. And I agree. Like Ironclad is a cheap 12-point beater. Like he's not bad.
Yeah, he's definitely good. So, Protectorate, let's what are your thoughts on them? What do you think they would like to see in CID?
I know what I'd like to see in
Well,
Initiate stop being free, but
yeah, let's table the nerfs and go for trying to bring things up.
uh, I'm not like all I ever see is Harvey and like Serenia and Krios 1, so I'm not really sure what to bring to them. I'm not familiar enough with Protectorate. I just don't play into them enough to give like a valuable critique on what
So,
they need.
given my voyeuristic relationship with Protectorate, the thing that I feel like a lot of Protectorate players would like to see happen with the faction is something happen with Temple Flame Guard. Like that whole theme just doesn't seem to work the greatest. And when you do see the Flame Guard theme, you're not seeing Flame Guard in it ever. Like Pyrrhus, when he came out, was really cool looking and maybe gave them a little bit of hope. But like in general, I just think much like the next faction we'll talk about, the Temple Flame Guard just really needs something, and I think that's really one of the big things that a lot of Protectorate players would like to see. There's also maybe some casters that could get buffed up because I think there's definitely a big valley between ones that are functional and ones that are not. But honestly, for me, I think Temple Flame Guard's a theme that needs to be touched.
That's fair, and I guess the only time I've ever seen Daughters of the Flame on the table, including when I play them, is in Laylee's Resistance. I
Hmm.
don't think I've ever seen them on the table in a Menoth list.
Yeah, they just don't seem to make the cut these days. So that one was nice and short and sweet. So let's get on to Kador. This is what I think most people would consider my main faction. So I have a lot of things to say about Kador in general, but Ethan, what do you have to go off of with the yield Kador?
The only thing I can really think of for Kador is like Cossites. Like I just want something to happen to them. Like they've just been neglected for so long. Like just give them Rat 6. Like come on.
I was so upset when I saw that Yuri Riot Quest version was not an attachment for them or somehow gave them some kind of buff. It was just so frustrating.
But he's got a Tharn bow. It's different.
I was like, this was your chance, Privateer Press, to pull these guys up out of the gutter.
They'll be there one day. Gotta believe.
But from my perspective, other than I could rant for a very long time on Iron Fang pikemen because pikemen were probably one of the very first things that I really enjoyed in Khador, and they just are not like when you put pikemen up next to Doom Reavers, it's a no brainer. Like it just doesn't there just isn't a reason to not run wolves over Legion of Steel. But I think the thing that I will consistently always complain about in Khador are assault commandos. Like they've been touched 2 or 3 times now in terms of dynamic updates or CIDs or addition changes, and they just can't seem to get them right. They're like somewhere in between Winter Guard and Pikemen, and that's not really the greatest place in the world to be. I think that the unit just really needs some retooling, and Privateer Press needs to go back to the drawing board with them.
I mean, they were popular when Asphyxius 2 was big and back in the day because they were immune to Excarnate, but
I think the biggest reason they were popular back then was because you could throw your own flamer and have it explode.
that could be it too.
So that was the reason why I saw them being taken. But right now they exist in they exist in one theme only, and that's the Winter Guard command theme. That's the only one they're allowed in, and they don't have a place in there. They just don't. They don't.
Yeah, no.
No, the theme does nothing for them other than just include them as something to exist. So, I think those guys. I'd love to be able to see them come out. Like I haven't. I've had a full unit since like since Mark II. Like they were the last thing I picked up in Mark II, but I have had them for a very long time, and I would be shocked if I still had all the pieces for them because they've just been moved around and I've never put them together. No reason to. So moving on to a controversial one, I think would be Crix. Is there anything you can think of off the top of your head that you'd like to see happen with that?
I know, like Dark Host, people have been clamoring for like more utility solos and like stuff to buff their single wound infantry. But I think, and this isn't even a hot take, 'cause I think every Crix player is like, why don't they have access to strange bedfellows? And I don't know if that'd be a Sid thing again, just to test it as a Crix theme, because when half the casters in the theme are Crix and Crix can't even take it. Otherwise, Morty too. Like, I want to like her. I want to like her so bad. She just doesn't.
Yeah, and I think I'm in a similar boat with you. I'll always question why it wasn't in there. Like it just doesn't seem like I can't think of why this would be a bad thing to have strange bedfellows and a Crix pairing when it can be like hookered out everywhere else. But I think for me, and this one's kind of the other side of the same coin to you is Martin ep1. I think that they really trashed her when they decided to like take her spell list and break it out between her and Venethrax. And I think she just comes up a little short these days in terms of like she had a very pointed goal in the game and was really good, but then the shift in how she functioned, I think just kind of made her like more she's kind of always sitting on the sidelines. And if I couldn't pick her as something that goes into CID, I'd really like to see Ghost Fleet go into CID just because I feel like it was a big boogeyman for a while, and the world we exist in right now just doesn't seem to like treat it very well. So I think Ghost Fleet has like 1 or 2 builds, and that's it. And even when we're looking at building it in Brawl Machine, which I won't use to kind of look at what goes into CID or not, it just it was real flat. Like there's just not a whole lot of interest in that theme.
Well, like it did go through Sid. It got nerfed in the last Sid that it went through.
And that's what I'm saying is like it went through, got knocked down, and I think the world that we live in now in Mark III, the current game state, I don't think that the changes that happened to Ghost Fleet really needed to happen. Like
I
right now
mean,
at least.
there's always going to be a problem with Ghost Fleet, and until you address that elephant, I don't know how they fix it. And that's like Denny. They wanted to make the theme playable with other casters besides Denny, but then they took away Point Blank from the Ghost Crew, so like they lost a little bit of armor cracking. So it's like, well, why don't I just still play them with Denny? And like that's the problem. Like you can't buff all their guns because the debuff queen of the world, Denny One, exists.
Yeah, I mean, and that might just be an easy change to the theme to say like Denegra can't be included in it. Like I'd go with that. Like I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Yeah, but like no other theme has done that I can think of that like outright says not this caster. Like
Well, I
how
know
would you
there's
word
ones that
that?
only include certain casters, so
But I
eh,
feel like that's different than saying like this one caster isn't allowed.
yeah. I mean, if Denegra's a War Witch in all of her forms, I think, so you could say non-War Witch casters.
Yeah, I guess.
But
Or no. Benny 2 is a Wraith Witch, she's not a War Witch.
bummer. So I think Crix is, like I said, it's a little bit contentious, but for the most part, I think we're both kind of settled into. We'd like to see some changes to Morton Nebra just in general, but some of the themes could use a little bit of a touch too.
Hmm.
So this one, I think you'll have a lot to say about, and I think I have at least a little bit to say about it, and that's Retribution. How do you feel about them? I know their CID is coming up, so let's not touch on any of the things that are going to go into that CID. Those are off limits for this discussion. So what do you think?
Which is totally fair because I haven't followed any of it because I honestly don't know because how do you get them to stop relying on every theme as Tridents and Friends? And like there's a lot of stuff, a lot of Ret, like Ret as a faction is a combined arms faction that wants to mix houses and stuff, and it feels like the theme list designs inhibit their core thing. Like their whole shtick was like mixing Mage Hunters with Dawn Guard, with Fire Jacks, with Shield Jacks, and like you can't really do that. And even I just want Fire Jacks in Forges of War. Like that would make me happy. Like it's the Jack theme, and you can't take some of the best Jacks for the theme. Like you know what? Uh, what are they called? The mages. You know what the mages would really like? A Jack that gave +3 range to spells. Oh, that Jack isn't allowed in theme because it's a Fire Jack. Like just little things like that.
So for me, I think, and this is, I don't play Retribution often, and every time I've gotten a hold of it, I haven't touched it much. I think that's probably going to be the next faction I play on our channel. But um, the uh, the thing that I think when I look at their models is that a lot of their things are really designed around a cramped space. So like if there's one thing, like say you want a good melee infantry dude, there's like three options that are all very similar to one another. So when one has just a small edge over the other, you kind of just pick that one, right? Like I think to get off the melee thing because the House Eluir swordsmen are in there. Um, Ranged options, like when you look at something like comparing House Guard riflemen to Invictors, like they're both really similar. They're not allowed in the same theme together, from what I understand,
They are not.
but they're just it seems like Retribution's kind of made up of a bunch of mini factions and it's already a smaller faction on its own. So I think like more like how you were saying, there should be more crossover and they should be allowed to use their tools. Like an irregular style theme for Retribution would probably be really welcome for them.
Yeah, something that.
Outside, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say just something that allowed them to combine the houses and actually like play a combined arm style of all their mini factions of an already small faction.
Yep. And otherwise, outside of that, I think their heavies could use some tinkering just across the board. I often see that when I'm building lists, I'm leaning more on lights or colossals and character heavies instead of like, oh, I can't wait to put a griffin, or not a griffin, a manticore in my list, or I can't wait to put a phoenix in my list. Something like that. Those, I think, when you look at something like a phoenix in particular, I always feel like I'm better off taking Imperatus and a Chimera.
Yeah, because the heavies are also overcosted because of their dual purpose. They all have a gun, and they all have like not mediocre, but they cap at POW 17 base. Like they all have the Arcanist tax added on, and that's not even factored into their point costs because they
Yep.
all pay for their gun. So like they're okay at melee, they're okay at shooting, but they're like a jack of all trades, master of none. So like you're paying for that versatility of like I just want a cheap beater, and like the Sphinx is probably the cheapest at 13 that solves that issue. And I think he's a POW 17, POW 18. I'd have to pull him up in Warham to look, but again, he's not allowed in Forges, the Warjack theme, and the lights that came out just outshine the heavies so much. He's a POW 17. Like those new Vire lights, like why are they Rat 6 and Rat heavies are Rat 5? Like it's just a smack in the face to ret heavies that the
Yeah.
lights outshoot them and in some cases out melee them because they're cheaper and you can spam more of them.
I think Retribution sometimes feels like one of those people who gets too much plastic surgery and like the structure of their body starts to fall apart. I feel like Retribution's been touched so many times by so many different devs that the faction just fell apart a little bit.
Yeah, and like that last sid they had with the Origins theme, like I know a lot of the players were unhappy with what happened to battle mages because like PP had an idea of what they wanted with them and players had an idea and there was just no like conversation. PP put their foot down like no, this elite skirmish like utility unit is now going to be your frontline unit and they're like they don't do that.
Yep. So now we can go to one that I think both of us will have a lot to talk about, and that's convergence. What
You
are
can
your
go first on this. I got to think a little bit harder.
Okay, for me, the biggest one is I think Destruction Initiative kind of turns into a really flat theme right now. Like when I was first got a hold of some convergence and started building lists for the channel, I was building some in Destruction Initiative, and then Ethan had pointed out to me that like I still had this idea in my head that I'm going to get a ton of servitors and it's going to be cool. And then Ethan pointed out to me that Clockwork Legion gets 6-point lights for free, and I was like, how does that even make sense? Because like and I know some of that like this is probably a bad time to say this, but I'm not gonna, when we trash talk any of the things that are happening in the factions right now, it's not like a slight against Privateer Press and we're not disgruntled about it. It's just like, I'm sure we all sit around the gaming table every now and again and complain about things, but there's tons of stuff to enjoy in this game, but there are definitely things that I don't enjoy in it. And one of them is that Destruction Initiative kind of feels like it should be the Jack faction or the Jack theme, and it just like there's no reason to not play Clockwork Legion all the time forever. Like
Yeah,
I don't often find myself wanting to build in Destruction Initiative unless I'm building a very specific like Iron Mother list, and sometimes I might even say I'd run that in Clockwork Legion.
yeah, because like, why they get the free lights now? That was one of the big Oblivion updates. Like, Destruction Initiative took like 3 to 4 different nerfs in that update. When the Oblivion switch and Clockwork Legion just keeps getting better and better. And like, if you want to run Jacks, you take Clockworks because you get free lights and you actually get good units. Whereas in Destruction Initiative, you only play that if you want to play with a TEP. But like the TEPs haven't been good in a long time. Like they went from best battle engine in the game in Mark II to like when was the last time you seen a TEP on the table?
Yeah,
Like a,
to be fully honest, I don't own any TEPs, and it's not actually affecting me.
no, because like Spray 10 Speed 5 battle engine just isn't what it used to be. Like yeah, it gets all the boosts and stuff, but like it's not enough to not play Clockworks. The only thing
Mhm.
you don't get in Clockworks is servitors. But if you take a Prime Axiom, that fixes that issue. So now, like, you get flare bots for all your stuff. So like, you can still get that stuff in Clockworks, in addition to voids being in theme. So you can take 2 of them because I don't think they are in Destruction Initiative. Like, you have to actually use your Merc slot on them, and like you have to use your Merc unit on Gaspy because he's not in theme, which isn't a big deal. But it's just it's just kind of fallen to the wayside, which is
So
kind of sad.
you think your vote goes towards the TEP more than anything, other than the Destruction Initiative issue?
No, actually, the thing I probably want to see most, besides that, because I think you hammered it in pretty well, is I really want Iron Mother's feet to be all friendly faction models instead of just models in her battle group become Matt and Rat 8. Like, that was something I really wanted to see her be able to buff all the units up, and even, like, all the servitors she supposedly wants to take in Destruction Initiative, because they're all Rat 5, and I thought that'd be really cool if her feat allowed servitors to get up to Rat 8 for just one turn. That was something I really want to see in a Sid someday.
And this is maybe like I'm extending my welcome in the convergence topic here, but I would really like to see the obstructors and reductors get a little bit more efficacy too. It seems like when they buffed the medium base infantry, those little robots got left in the dust.
Yeah, the obstructors are just like a cheap soul option if you want to play the recursion game, but they don't do much.
Mhm.
And like reductors, like they just need assault or something. Like speed 5 with a spray 6 is just kind of sad.
Yeah, 10 body spray 6 unit is not really that great.
You want to take the UA on for once because they're at 5, and you want to be able to re-roll that at least.
Hmm. So Crucible Guard, I know I've got some fun ones for this one, but how are you thinking about Crucible Guard in general?
I honestly don't know what. Oh, I guess I'd like something to happen with Baldwin. Like, I know his whole kit is different than Sylvester, and I've said it before, but like, I feel like his feat is just literally a worse version of Sylvestro's. And like, if I wanted to play Baldwin, why wouldn't I just play Sylvestro and get an overall better kit? Like, yeah, he's got all that cool stuff that affects the infantry, but it's just like, besides Mr. Juicer, who needs like maybe a rework or something, I don't know how to fix him.
Yeah, I think
Like,
he's coming up in their drugs are bad CID.
yeah, like Baldwin going to Focus 7 would be a big help. Something small like that, and something to differentiate him more from Sylvestro's feat, instead of like, because his +2/+2 is effectively an additional die drop the lowest, but he needs the enemy model in control, and like, if you don't kill the whole unit, you can't cycle it, whereas Sylvestro doesn't care. Like, he just needs friendlies in control, and they all get the buff regardless.
Yeah, I think it was one of those things. It's kind of like going back to that Rhett issue where like Silvestro and Baldwin are really, really close together. They have things that separate them out, make them distinct from one another. But when you really boil them down to their bare bones, like they're really similar.
Yeah,
And Silvestro comes out on top most of the time.
like, and I think there are some cool Baldwin lists that can do different stuff than Sylvester. It just feels like, especially for a limited faction, like, I don't want to see a caster that feels like just a worse version of another caster
Yep.
in a caster pool of 5 casters.
No, 100% agree. I think for me, the thing that I would like to see with Crucible Guard is this one's a little bit strange, but I really want to see the Prima Materia theme force get reworked. One of the things that really attracted me to Prima Materia when Crucible Guard, when they first came out, I was super on them. Like as soon as Privateer Press announced they were coming, and then when they said that the huge bases were going to be Bahi models, I was like, no, I'm out of this faction. And then they switched it back, and now I'm good. I was back in, and I played Crucible Guard hard when they first were being teased. Like I think that was the first time I ever started dipping my toe into like playing with proxied models, like even printed out their little paper dolls and everything. And the thing that got me really interested in some of their stuff was like the Prima Materia theme in general. Like it wasn't what it did or what you could bring, it was how they explained it. Like and this is really paraphrasing, but the Prima Materia faction was kind of sold to players as this is the theme force. I mean, the theme force. That this is the theme force that Crucible Guard has all this top secret tech that they work on, and the Magnum Opus theme is more like we're selling ourselves to other people to use our products or whatever. But the Prima Materia one was the experimental stuff. And what I would really like to see happen in that theme force, because right now it doesn't really communicate that very well, is I would like to see what they used to do with theme forces, where they would introduce units or solos that would have completely different rules. So one of the things that I would really think would be cool in there is, since the Crucible Guard field alchemists are or combat alchemists are rec options in there, I would really like to see 3 brand new attack types on that card. Like strike the old ones and give them super cool attack types for their little alchemy bombs, or and maybe do a few things with some stuff in there, like just a way to show that like this is the stuff that Crucible Guard doesn't want other people to see them messing with. Like that, I would really love to see out of that. Just make the theme force a little bit more close to the way they tried to sell it through the fluff. Because right now on the table, I don't get that feeling at all.
See, isn't that based more of like, aren't most of the units in Primal Materia not allowed in the other theme, like the medium base dudes and even the Crucible Guard infantry?
I think that in Magnum Opus you can still take the medium base guys. I think it's the combat. I can't remember what you can and can't take in each of the themes, but it's not enough to make it feel like it's completely differentiated. You know what I mean? Like a lot of the things still feel very much the same.
Oh, yeah, because I'm looking at it right now. Because Magnum Opus says Crucible Guard units and solos, and the other one says medium base.
Yeah, it's not too different from Magnum Opus, and Prima Materia have very little that they exclude from one another, it feels like to me. I know that Prima Materia gets often taken as like the Warjack theme force, but that doesn't even really work as well as it used to anymore. It's like basically, do you want double shield guards?
Yeah.
So I think that would be the cool. I still like it would be so sweet to see Combat Alchemists just get completely different rules in that theme force, but
But
that might be
triple
a
ice
little awkward.
cages.
No, no ice cages for me.
But they're ice cages that don't have to hit, man.
I
So
know.
good.
So this one will be a doozy. Let's talk about non nerfs for infernals.
Can we just pass?
Yeah.
I don't like. What more do they want? They already have enough. Like,
No, I think we'll skirt our fake law on this one. I really think that in this faction, I'm not gonna try and say they need to completely revisit summoning, but what they do need to figure out something is how to tone back the tormentor to where it's not like it's extremely apparent that there's a problem with the tormentor because every single theme or every single list you see that's in Dark Legacy, it's nothing but tormentors for days. Like there's no lamenters coming in on the table unless it's points that are restricting them. You're never starting out with a what is it? It's not the Devastator. I can't remember the name of
Desolator.
the Decimator. No,
Desolator.
that's a Kador one.
No, the Desolator is the spray guy.
Oh, Desolator. I said Decimator and thought that we were on the same page. But
No,
yeah, the Desolator just isn't because of course he's basically a tormentor, but 2 more points.
so you
And
summon them.
yep, so you summon him. The snake is like really not taken in main lists or summon, maybe sometimes with Zadaroth or Agathon, but like the tormentor just has a problem and it's keeping the other options in the faction back a little bit.
I mean, you take him because he's the cheapest, and then if you need the utility of the other ones, you just summon them turn one, and you're good to go. Like, why waste the extra point or two when you can just summon them and be just as fine?
I would just like Infernals to not or Dark Legacy list to not just be tormentors and some stuff. Like that's what I'd like to see out of them.
That's fair.
And that's kind of like it's pushing down the tormentor to bring everything else up, but it's probably I think that it's not too far fetched of an idea.
There's a lot of things that could be changed in the Infernals, and I'm not even going to start ranting.
Yeah, I know. We'll have a special Infernals episode. You can unlock it in our OnlyFans account.
Oh boy. Just listen to me bitch about Infernals for 3 hours, and you can see how little of a grasp I have on this game.
So we're getting into the horde stuff now. Although we did need to touch on mercenaries later, but so outside of what's gone into CID currently, what is there anything you feel like Trollbloods could see a revisit to?
For Trollbloods, I'm still waiting to see how the Sid shakes up.
Hmm.
Because like I didn't know if Rune Shapers needed to be touched more, but I want to see what their final rules are before saying like, oh, runes of war will never come back. But like overall, I'm not really sure what outside this latest Sid, besides some of the legacy units that weren't in there, because it is kind of frustrating that the only unit that went into the Sid was the unit that was most taken anyway for
Yeah.
trolls.
Hmm.
It's like, did champs need to go through another Sid? Like, they're already the most taken unit. Like, what about all the other Trollkin units? I wish they would have got looked at.
Yeah, I think for me, the lowest hanging fruit possible is the hooch hauler. Like I really feel like that battle engine needed a once over. And maybe the Northkin Raiders could go along with that too. Um, Otherwise, I do agree with you that the rest of the infantry units like sluggers, Creel warriors could get another touch. But like it really was interesting. We've talked about it a lot, and I think some other people have, where like Trollbloods just kind of feels like every list you build is the champion list. And my more controversial pick for something that I'd like to see happen is and this is kind of me breaking my own rules again, but I really would have liked to have seen Power of Dunia have the ability to play like old EE used to, because I think that list probably wouldn't be as much of a pain in the butt now as it was back then.
Yeah, something simple like in Power of Dunia, lights get AP or something
Yeah,
like that.
something just to give them a way to play that list again, because I know a lot of players definitely have some of those like massive amounts of lights hanging around. And for those of you who are like newer to the game, EE is evolutionary elementalism. It was an old theme list that was specific to Kalandra, and it just really leaned in on taking a ton of the light elemental war beasts. So like I own I owned like 5 slag trolls and 5 storm trolls just because of that theme. And she was on the ADR. That's another way back machine thing. So that's why I had so many of those. But that yeah, I'd like to see. I would have liked to have seen that come back somehow.
And I guess
So
this isn't a troll blood specific, and I'll bring it up like in everyone. Like I think a lot of the character war beasts and units should have went. I'd like to see them instead either go down in cost because I think a lot of them are overcosted, or get more unique animi. Like,
yeah, I'd like to see that too. Like Ruck is cool with Primal, but if he had something that was a little more unique,
but
especially
now
now
like
since we've got like cool ways to get our mat going well. But
yeah, you're a rage faction, and now you have the troll lights, so it's like
yeah,
primal and
Primal
heavies
is
just feels bad.
necessary. Yeah. So on to Circle. I'm going to take this one first because my list is a lot shorter than maybe yours will, being like a Circle main. But for me, I'd really like to see the living war beasts get some kind of touch to be brought up a little bit. I know that there's a lot of other things in the faction that are a little bit more pertinent to be dealt with, but the coolest things in Circle are the living war beasts, in my opinion. Like the cool werewolf dudes and the goats are real sweet. But when you see a Circle list being put down in front of you, typically it's like bare minimum battle group points just so you can get your fury, so you have more room for Tharn, or you're taking a bunch of wolves. And I would really just like to see more efficacy being put into the living war beasts.
Yeah, and that's fair. That's one of my side tangents. Like all the werewolves just still feel so expensive, and like I think I said it in one of the games we played with Melvin and Mayhem. I was like, Melvin and Mayhem just feels like a better werewolf. So he has like the different abilities. He's about the same cost, but he just does more work.
Like a more
And
egregious werewolf, yeah.
yes, and like I think the character werewolves like Loki and Getorix, 19 still feels really expensive, and I really this is probably like I know people like spiny growth on Getorix. I've wanted since like the first time I ever read his fluff book. Like I remember reading back when they released the books, like Getorix's book. I opened it, I read his fluff first before looking at his stats, and I was like, based on his fluff description, I 100% thought that his animus was rage. And like, spiny growth isn't bad, but that's one of those things. Like, as a character, I feel like rage wouldn't. They refuse to give circle rage, but I think at Getorix it's fine because it's only in one theme, and it would be with the Chromax, so the Beastcaster. So I feel like him having access to rage would also help buff up the Chromax. And then Loki, I really, really want his Animus to not be elusive because that's already on like 3 different things in the faction.
Elusive is just one of those animi that when it goes on to a heavy, you're just like, sweet.
I mean, he's a Def 14 heavy, but like this goes back to like making their character like making anime kind of unique, just kind of like their bond. Like
Mhm.
I'd really like Far Strike on him. That way he could actually use his thrown hook and not just feel like you're throwing away a 19-point heavy for the next turn. And then that also buffs up Tanith because Tanith was really like Far Strike. And again, it's only in one theme. Like I think pre-theme machine, Far Strike would have been too good because Loki was taking every game with Kruger too. But now that's only in Tharn, and with Tanith, I feel like Far Strike would be fine on him, and I would really love to see that.
Yeah, I agree with just about everything you got there. I think there's a lot that could happen to Circle that would change up. I mean, we touch so much on like the Reeves or the Wolves or the Druids or anything like that, or Secret Masters even. But I think there's like just like Retribution. I think those tricky factions just kind of get a little bit like muddy sometimes when they start touching them a lot. So I think they just need a very focused look at Circle as a whole.
And I'm also really sad that the Chromax skipped the Tharn Sid.
Yeah,
Like they
that.
put in Getorix, and he
Mm.
doesn't even have the Tharn keyword, but they're like, now we're not looking at Chromax. Like,
Yeah, as much as I am very happy to see that Chromac 2 is kind of kicking in a pit doing nothing, uh, I still lament that they didn't go into it.
yeah.
So next up we have Legion of Everblight, and they just came off of their CID, but I think that the one thing that still kind of like plagues me a little bit with Legion is the twins. Um, I think both them as their like the one where they're a unit version. I was gonna say epic version, but that language doesn't exist anymore in the game. But Rise 1 and Saren 2 really just don't feel like they work. You know, I think if you're a good player and you can do some cool, fun, tricky things with them, but I think they're just a little bit off of where they really like they had a cool design idea that just didn't translate well, and I think that they need a look again. And I wouldn't be opposed to seeing their first versions, Saren and Rise 1, changing along with that too. I think that's really the only thing in Legion that I have a super big problem with.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. Like something small, even like buffing their hit points. Like each of them having 8 wounds as a unit is really bad for a warcaster, and the fact that Riot doesn't bring War Beast points. Like you have twice the amount of fury you need to generate for your War Beast or for your caster, but you just have the standard amount of War Beast points. Like if Riot could bring her War Beast points, that way you feel like you can't take a min battle group with them and feel like it does something because that's just your 12 fury battery, and then you need them to also do work with the list. Like, so if she brought Warby's points, it would help dramatically.
Yeah,
And maybe like
they've
maybe if
got
they weren't a unit,
24 Warjack points, so they're like the only person who has less than them is Bethane, and she brings her own beast.
yeah, like maybe if they just still were like maybe 12 boxes each, not a unit, because it gets funky with their upkeeps. Like you can't have a psychic vampire on Saren, and I think Ryas has an upkeep too. You can't have that on them because they're a unit. Like maybe if they were solos that were attached, or had some kind of weird attachment rule where they had to stay within like a certain distance of each other
Yeah, I think
instead of
just
being tied to a unit.
yeah, as being a unit really hurts them a lot. So next up, we've got Scorn, and I think Scorn is one that it was used to being the low faction on the totem pole for a long time, and then got brought up to being one of the best in the game, and then is kind of floating in that mid tier right now. But I think if you asked a Scorn player, they'd tell them that they're pretty trash. And I don't agree with that. I think there's a lot of cool things in Scorn outside of Exalted. But for me, I think the thing that I'd like to see the most come out of Scorn is some of the things that are related to Masters of War get reworked. And I still think that Fists of Halak in like, and again, I'm doing some old player bias thing here, but Fist of Halak used to be the problematic faction for Scorn. It was for Xerxes 1 specifically, and it just made the medium-based infantry, all of the cataphracts, really, really good. And I think they got hit real hard when they went down to 5 wounds. And I think there's really no world that we exist in, right, or no list that we have right now that would really have a problem with Fists of Halak back then. So like the cataphracts could go up to 8 wounds, and that would be fine. You would feel no change in the game or impact. But then seeing like some of the non Ferox Praetorians getting a buff would be good, and I really don't see why Makeda 1 can't just give all Praetorians vengeance instead of just swordsmen, because it kind of makes it so you never want to take Karax or Keltari.
Yeah, and they used to be really cool. I remember when they got taken all the time pre-theme machine. It's like they have a lot of cool rules. It's just they've been outpaced, and I can't even remember what theme they're in these days because that theme just never sees play.
Yeah,
But
it's when you say Masters of War, people are like, well, that's a theme in Scorn. How many turtles do you bring in that theme?
yeah, it is kind of just dirt turtles and wind.
Yep, and bringing something back like Fists of Halak or Fists of Halak, I think is what it was called.
Yeah,
Not Fury of Halak. I think that's
yes,
actually Xerxes' feet. But
yeah.
or no, that's Xerxes 2's name is Fury of Halak. But and that could be wrong too, so we'll get the
No, it
info.
is. It is Fury Havelock. That's his name.
So I think getting Masters of War and old Fists of Halak back on the radar would make it so that people wouldn't feel like feel a little bit of the retribution woes and that they always have to take battle engines.
Yeah, that's fair.
So Grimkin is the next one up on the list, and I think they're kind of getting like the miniest of CIDs. It might be just the Dreadrot Dragoon that goes into their CID, but I'm really hoping that it's and the Grimkin Archon that'll go into CID, but I'm really hoping it'll be a few other things. And I think the big one for both you and me right now is Dreadrots need something.
Yeah.
There's they're the only reason you bring them ever is for corpses.
Yep, for your card.
Yep.
And like they have to go into the SID because I don't see them releasing the new solo that buffs them without actually like changing the unit so it actually sees play. Unless his buffs are just so bananas that because when you see bump lists, like it's always just double Mace Slayers and all the Madcaps. Like you don't really see Hollow Men or Dreadrots or even Murder Crows or Piggybacks. Like it would be nice to see some of that other infantry brought up
Yeah, it kind of goes
instead of
back
just
to that.
being Mace Slayer City.
If you're trying to base survivable infantry off of 5 boxes, it's not going to work. Even if you put impervious flesh on them, like piggybacks are kind of the prime example of how 8 boxes just needs to be back in the game.
See, I don't know if they could with Shield Wall or Armor 18 Impervious Flesh. Like,
I mean, the way that all the stats in Warmachine have been Yu-Gi-Oh'd, like I've heard it once somewhere else where like the lethality of the games kind of got pumped up a bit. I like that language. You know, something like 8 box, Arm 18, Impervious Flesh, piggybacks doesn't really seem like that big of a deal.
yeah, I guess when you got things like Flames running around and you would still be Dice plus damage on them with all the Flames buffs.
Flames and a Raged Malvin and Mayhem, like it just doesn't matter.
Eh, you can't get Rage. You get Fury.
Vlad 2 defeated Doom Reavers. Yeah, Fury, sorry.
Wow, that's
So
fair.
I think those are the big ones for me. And I would agree with what Ethan said. A lot of those small based models just kind of need a little bit more. There just needs to be more diversity in the faction, even though it's really, thin in terms of being a limited one.
And
So
I think the low-hanging fruit for them, for me too, is like just to throw this in there, is why aren't the 4 Horsemen a rec option? Like,
I was gonna say, like, before I started like transitioning into the next faction, I was thinking about that, and thank you for reminding me. Like sometimes in the game of Riot Quest, you win or you lose, and the 4 Horsemen lost real hard.
like they should be really cool, but like Bump is just so strapped for points that you don't want to spend 6 points on a 4 hit point Arm 14 model, even with Ancient Shroud.
Yeah, I think I tried to build a list with them one day, and I was like, I lose a Grave Ghoul. That's not going to happen. Like
Yeah,
they're just not. They came out of the oven half baked. I think there was maybe a little bit of talk that they were too good, and then they came out just not good enough. So like the people who are buying those things are either Grimkin faction purists or they're Riot Quest people, because Warmachine players are not buying this because they think it's good.
yeah. And like they exist in a world where a Hermit exists, so like if you're already teching for Hermit, they're just kind of caught in the crossfire with
Yeah,
less boxes.
with less boxes to make it easier, right?
And Hermit's free in themes,
Yep.
whereas Horseman isn't.
Yeah, for whatever reason. So next up, we got mercenaries, and this is a massive faction. So there might be like a few gimmies here and there that we can maybe talk a little bit extra on, even though we haven't been adhering to that at all, which is fine. But I think to start off, well, Ethan, you kick this one off because I think there's a lot that I could maybe mention. We'll get some of your stuff out of the way first.
So I think one of the biggest things for me is like all of the character units, not all of them, I'd say about 90% of them feel overcosted and are never taken. Like when I first got into Mercs, I really wanted to play Lele's Resistance with Gaston, and I was like, you know what, I'll play with Sam and a unit of Devil Dogs, and I was like, why the fuck are they 18 points for 10 dudes? Like
Yeah,
it just feels like some of these character units are so overpriced.
some of those points are from a time since past. I
And
think
like they
that's
haven't been
a lot of
touched.
it.
Like Boom Howlers feel too expensive. Dan and Blythe and Bull, like Miss Hunters are still 19 points.
Yeah, and yeah, they're pricey. So I think for me, outside of like maybe going back to revisit some of those old fluff themes, because like Kingmaker was really cool, um, but it just kind of gets thrown to the wayside these days. Um, I think I'd really like to see a lot of the dwarf things get touched. I know Gorton's taken a bunch. And Osram is always going to be evergreen, but Durgan Madhammer really needs some rework, and the high shields really could use some help. Um, I feel like the dwarfs are such a not only is it such a really important part to the Iron Kingdoms in general, being like one of the few nations that kind of stands on its own, even though they're in the mercenary thing. I think that dwarves in the fantasy universe are just something that people really like. And when you are sitting there like a new player's like, oh sweet, they have dwarves in this game, and they go for it, they're like, oh, there's like a unit that I can take, and then after I play with that unit for a while, I'm only ever going to play with my lights and heavies.
Yeah.
So like the high shields need some help, and I think Durgan Madhammer needs to be looked at real hard.
Yeah, especially with that Trollcaster that just came out that we can do
Gunbjorn
it.
too, yeah.
Yep. Like his feet just feels like a worse version of Gunbjorn's, depending on how Gunbjorn's feet out. But yeah, I believe he could use some work. Also, like for me, Soldiers of Fortune got me into Mercs along with Laylee's Resistance, but unfortunately it got me into Mercs when Flames was going through Sid. So I bought all the Steelhead stuff, and it felt like the week after I got it, Flames invalidated the entire theme because it does everything Steelheads wants to do, just better.
Yeah, Steelhead's like it's not so much that it just does everything they do plus more. Not that it does it better, I think. Steelheads still kind of have this like really cheap world they exist in, but when you're inexpensive, that doesn't make you good.
Yeah,
Not in this universe anymore.
no.
Um, my last bellyache about mercenaries, and I know that some people will probably like chide me for this one a little bit, is this cross faction stuff just always falling into the mercenaries universe is getting a little like stale. So like the strange bedfellows thing being a theme that exists in mercenaries just doesn't feel right to me. Like I understand the reasoning that they've put behind it, but my parents told me reasons for things when I was a kid that I didn't believe either, and I really think that the strange bedfellows should have been convergence and cricks only and should have never made it into the mercs universe.
And I think that's an agreeable take that a lot of players have. It's just like they wanted Aurora 2 to be a Merc for some reason, so they made it a Merc theme. And that feels like the only reason why. And I don't even see why Aurora 2 is a Merc. Like, yes, she's fighting with Iron Mother in the fluff. That doesn't mean she skips her whole faction to work for mercenaries to work for other people, because she only works for Convergence.
Yeah,
Like,
it's not like she pulled a cane and got booted from her whole faction, right?
no, they're just doing like a mild civil war
Yep.
during an
It's
apocalypse.
a,
Like,
it's a family spat.
basically.
Yep. So the last one on the list then is mercenaries, and I think this one is going to be one where you have a lot more to say than I do.
Oh, we
Um,
just did mercenaries.
or not mercenaries, minions. Sorry. So I'm gonna knock my one thing out for minions because my minions knowledge is not anywhere near as vast as yours. I think you played minions for a good year and a half, 2 years straight almost. And for me, I think the one I'd like to see the most is like I'd like to see Blindwater and fit the Thornfall theme forces become a little bit more relevant than just always taking will work for food. And I think that's something that a lot of minion players would agree with me on. But I think Ethan, you probably have a lot more pointed things to discuss about minions. So what would some of those be?
Now that's actually pretty much what drove me away from minions was like every time I wanted to play Blind Water, like it's just Maylock and posse spam. Like you could do some cute stuff with like Jaga and Croaks, but like a lot of the other stuff, like Blind Water, literally 3 of the theme benefits are just posse. Like the theme just wants you to play posse, and Thornfall is getting a Sid someday. Like they keep saying it, it's coming. Like winter is coming, it's gonna happen.
Yep.
I'll believe it when I see it. But like everything just feels better and will work for food because you actually get to mix the support. Like even dedicated infantry class casters like Midas, like he desperately wants Gator support. Like he wants the pot, he wants the spell slave. Like maybe if pigs could get some equivalents like that in Thornfall, like they could see some play. But then, in addition to like the the mercenary problems. Like all Riot Quest solos are in Will Work for Food. So if you want to take all of the Archons, if you want to take the new Tharn guy that's going to come out, who's absolutely bananas with some of the casters, if you want to take uh, Boomy 3, he's in Will Work for Food. Like, it's just, I don't know how, and they already nerfed Will Work for Food. Like, they took away some of the benefits of running Beast Heavy with the +2 speed. I'd like to see the other themes be playable because I just got tired of playing Will Work for Food paired with Will Work for Food.
Yep.
And even now, like when Lord Aslo got me excited, I'm like, why aren't I just playing him and Will Work for Food? Because he gets Archons, and they are much better for his feat than everything in Thornfall.
Yep. So a lot of the stuff in minions gets put on the wayside. So I think I know we've been going on for a good long time, but it's our first shot at this, and the CID wish listing is quite a big topic. But I figured this would be a nice one to kind of welcome us into the podcasting universe of Warmachine, and be sure to check out our YouTube channel, Big Top Gaming. If you haven't already, we do battle reports weekly now. Used to be twice a week. But we mix it up between Brawl Machine and War Machine proper, and we've been taking a bunch of requests for lists to be played on there. Also in the podcasting universe, I think right now the pandemic situation kind of makes coming up with things to talk about a little weird. So we'll probably be panning for those eventually. So if you have any suggestions for that, you can feel free to message the Big Top Gaming Facebook group. Otherwise, do you have any parting thoughts or last anything on your mind before we call it a night, Ethan?
I guess one overall thing, like somebody brought it up on the Facebook group for like to tie back in with like what we'd like for each faction, is a faction specific objective that you can take with each faction, if not theme specific objectives that do cool special stuff that are worth more victory points. Like that would be a cool thing to go through Sid for me to make lists feel more diverse.
And you could get some narrative fluff or narrative spice in here too. So that's a good one to think over. Maybe our listeners can come up with something neat on their own to just like kind of go through a thought exercise. Otherwise, thanks for stopping by Big Top Gaming again, and we look forward to making more of these for you in the future.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.